got the Cathaoirleach, and I want to start, Minister, by being absolutely honest about COP27. From my perspective, I think it's been a colossal failure. There's nothing of real substance achieved, and as one report noted, it'll make no difference whatsoever. The fossil fuel industry will continue to expand, greenhouse gas emissions will increase, and the climate crisis will get worse. And as if to copper fasten this, Minister, you granted a licence to Europa Oil and Gas before you flew to Egypt. And we will see thousands, if not millions, of tonnes of additional CO2 being released into the atmosphere as a result of that decision, if they are successful, and that indeed will fly in the face of the science and lock us into decades more reliance on fossil fuel infrastructure. And what should we say about the much lauded Loss and Damage Fund? I know plenty of NGOs and individuals who have welcomed it, and I respect their view, but I'm extremely doubtful about its effectiveness and its likely success. The details are hopelessly vague and, more accurately, completely non-existent. We don't know where the money is to come from, we don't know when it'll come or how it'll come. We are told a transitional committee will be set up by world governments. This will then work with the view to operationalising, and I quote, the funding arrangements. They will invite the international financial institutions to consider, at the 2023 spring meeting of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, the potential for such institutions to contribute to funding arrangements, including new and innovative approaches responding to the loss and damage associated with the adverse effects of climate change. And so, to translate that into English, next year we will set up a committee to look into inviting private institutions to consider funding a possible fund. We will entrust the future of vulnerable nations and their peoples to the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, and we will look at innovative approaches to funding arrangements. What could go wrong, Minister? When has the World Bank or the IMF ever let down the people of the developing world, or indeed workers and ordinary people anywhere? And you know I'm being entirely ironic when I ask that question. But while the failure on the actual emissions and the supposed deal on loss and damage have made the headlines, I want to highlight what I think is another major failure of COP27. And this is the continued support for carbon markets and carbon trading as a mechanism to curb emissions. People before profit have long argued that the carbon trading system and the very idea of carbon credits is a setup for fraud and utter failure. It's simply a medieval indulgence to allow for continued fossil fuel use. But whatever hope there was in this system must surely have rested on the fact that it should be open and transparent, and where we could see what was working and what was not working, even in terms of the logic of a carbon market. But incredibly, COP27 has made that idea even more remote. There's an excellent summary on the website called Climate and Capitalism, and it summarises it like this. COP27 managed to take a giant leap in the wrong direction when governments agreed 2 paragraphs on confidentiality in Article 6. It states that the participating party may designate information provided to Article 6 technical expert review team during the review as confidential. There goes your openness and your transparency. One observer told them that the confidentiality provisions on Article 6.2 are so embarrassing. You could drive a space shuttle through the loophole and still have plenty of room on all sides. That guarantees that we're going to have more fraudulent accounting of emissions, allow for more global emissions and more profiteering. It shores up a system of 3 decades now or more of utter catastrophic failure to rein in the fossil fuel interests that are driving this crisis. COP28 will be no different to COP27, and the answer to this crisis lies outside the conference halls of the great and the good. It lies with those fighting for global justice against a capitalist system that is causing the crisis. There is no hope in the mechanisms of market and capital, but there is hope in young people who are correctly identifying that we need system change and we need to stop the rush for profits and see it as the cause of overheating our planet. And I want to ask you, Minister, are you aware of Ronan Brown, a young student in UCD who's been on hunger strike since last Wednesday, who intends to go on third strike tomorrow, and whose desperation to highlight this crisis and to demand action has brought him to this point, and that's endangering that young man's life. And I would like to ask you, Minister, to take note of that and to possibly visit Ronan Brown or make contact with him, because young people are really in a desperate panic about what's happening to the planet and to their future. And they do mobilise and they do fight back, but they are feeling very, very frustrated about it. And I think it behoves you, as Minister responsible, to answer that young man and to persuade him to fight back against the system, but not to take any chances with his own health and his own life.